The California sun was slowly sinking below the horizon line, painting the ocean a deep orange color. I sat on the veranda of my Malibu home, watching the waves crash against the shore. 67 years of life had taught me to appreciate such moments of silence. My name is Rowan Hammond, and I have spent the last 40 years of my life building the crystal clear dry cleaners chain, which started with one small location in Santa Monica and has grown to 38 locations throughout Southern California. 3 years ago, I decided to retire. I sold a controlling interest in my company, leaving myself 20% and a seat on the board of directors, more symbolic than functional. With the proceeds, I bought this house overlooking the ocean. Not the biggest in Malibu, but perfect for a single man my age. My wife Lillian died 11 years ago of pancreatic cancer, and I've lived alone ever since. The only connection to my past is my son Otis. He is 42 years old and he seems to have it all. A successful career as a stock analyst, a beautiful wife Octavia, who works as a digital marketing consultant, and a house in an upscale Los Angeles neighborhood. I paid for his Stanford education, helped with the down payment on the house. But money was something that had always stood between us. I sighed and took a sip of scotch from my glass. The phone resting on the table vibrated, a message from Otis. Stop by with Octavia tomorrow night at 6. Need to discuss your finances and insurance. These care visits, as I called them to myself, had become more frequent over the past year. It all started after I stumbled on the stairs and broke my wrist. A minor injury, but Otis reacted as if I were dying. Suddenly, he was interested in my health, my finances, my future plans. Octavia, his wife, started sending links to nursing homes, calling them active retirement communities. I wasn't naive. In 40 years of running a business, I had learned to recognize people who were pursuing their own gain, even if those people are my own family. As I scrolled through the events of the past few months, I remembered how 2 months ago, Otis had offered to help me manage my investments. Dad, at your age, you shouldn't have to worry about things like that. I work with finances every day. Let me take care of it, he said. His voice sounded sincere, but his eyes betrayed the greed I'd seen thousands of times in people who came into my office with good deals. I politely declined, saying that I like to keep track of my own investments. It was true. I may not have been as knowledgeable about modern technology as younger people, but finance had always been my forte. Otis' reaction surprised me. He wasn't just disappointed, he was angry. His face contorted for a moment before he regained control and pulled on a smile. Sure, Dad, whatever you say. After that conversation, something changed. Otis started showing up more often, often unannounced. Octavia, who used to barely dignify me at family gatherings, suddenly became extremely thoughtful. They brought groceries I didn't ask for, rearranged furniture for my safety, insisted on installing security cameras in case you fell. And then I began to notice small but disturbing details. Once when Otis thought I was in the shower, I saw him looking through my bank statements lying on the table. Another time, Octavia was taking pictures of documents in my office. When I asked what she was doing, she said, "Oh, just thought you might need a digital copy of your important documents." A week ago, an event occurred that finally confirmed my suspicions. I was returning from the grocery store and saw Otis's car parked outside the office of Morris Frindle, my attorney. It could have been a coincidence, but my intuition told me otherwise. I parked a block away and waited. 20 minutes later, Otis emerged from the building with a folder in his hands. The expression on his face was smug, even triumphant. That evening, I called Morris. We'd known each other for 30 years. He'd helped me with legal matters when I expanded my business. "Rowan, I can't discuss other clients' visits," he said in a formal tone he'd never used with me before. "Morris, Otis is my son. If he came to you about my business, I have a right to know." A pause followed. "I'm sorry, Rowan, but I really can't talk about it." Professional ethics. I realized something was seriously wrong. Morris had never been this formal with me. We played golf every Sunday for 15 years until his arthritis became too much. He'd been to Lillian's funeral. He'd known Otis since he was a kid. "Morris, are you representing my interests or my son's interests?" I asked bluntly. Another long pause. "Maybe you should get another lawyer, Rowan," he finally said and hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. Thoughts swirled in my head. What was Otis up to? Why was Morris suddenly so distant? I ran through possible scenarios and none of them were encouraging. The next morning, I went to the bank and requested statements for all my accounts for the past year. Going through them at home, I found several transactions I couldn't remember. Small amounts, but they were regularly going into an account I didn't recognize. I called the bank. Mr. Hammond, these transfers were authorized by you through online banking, an employee told me. We sent you confirmations to your email. The problem was that I hardly ever used online banking. I had a login and password, but I preferred the old-fashioned methods. In-person visits to the bank, or at most, phone calls. I checked my email. Indeed, there were transaction notifications there, but they automatically went to my spam folder. Someone had accessed my online banking and was redirecting the notifications so that I didn't see them. Now the picture was starting to become clearer. Otis wasn't just concerned about my health. He was methodically preparing the ground to gain control of my finances, perhaps even trying to have me declared incompetent. I sat on the veranda, looking out at the ocean and contemplating my situation. The sun had almost set, turning the water into a dark, shimmering mass. My son, my flesh and blood, was plotting against me. Does it hurt? Yes, it hurt like hell. But I also felt anger. The smoldering, quiet anger of a man who'd built a business from the ground up and wouldn't let anyone, not even his own son, take away what he'd earned. The ringing of the phone snapped me out of my musings. The number of Hector Price, my old friend and former business partner. Unlike Morris, Hector had always been unwaveringly loyal. Rowan, buddy, I'm calling about our poker game on Friday. Are you still in? His voice sounded cheerful as always. Of course I am, Hector. In fact, there's something I'd like to discuss with you before the game. It's personal. A pause. That sounds serious. Are you okay? For now, yes, but I may need your help. Name the time and place. You know I'm always on your side. I hung up the phone and felt a glimmer of hope for the first time all day. Hector wasn't just a friend. Before his retirement, he'd been one of the most respected corporate lawyers in Los Angeles. If anyone could help me defend myself against Otis's machinations, it was him. Taking another look at the message from my son, I decided I would meet with them tomorrow. I would smile, nod, play the naive old man role they obviously expected me to play. In the meantime, I'll start developing my own plan. After all, I didn't build a successful business by being a simpleton. Otis might have been a smart stock analyst, but he clearly underestimated his father. See you tomorrow, son. I typed back and sent the message. Finishing my scotch, I stood up and took one last look at the dark ocean. The waves continued to lapping at the shore, indifferent to human drama. I felt a strange calmness. Tomorrow I would meet with Hector and begin preparing for a battle I never expected to lead a battle against my own son. The meeting with Otis and Octavia went exactly as I expected. Fake smiles, feigned concern, and barely concealed impatience. They sat across from me in the living room. Otis in his impeccable Brooklyn Brothers suit, Octavia in a modest but obviously expensive dress. On the coffee table lay a file folder, which my son periodically stroked as if it were a sacred artifact. Dad, Octavia and I are very concerned about your well-being, Otis began in a tone he probably thought was caring, but which sounded condescending to me. You're forgetting things more and more often, Octavia picked up on, though I couldn't recall any specific instances where I demonstrated forgetfulness in her presence. For example, you don't remember about those translations we discussed. I feigned confusion, allowing myself to look slightly bewildered. What translations? Otis threw Octavia a defeated look before turning to me. Here, see? We talked about this last time. You agreed to transfer some of the funds into a joint account so we could more easily help you with your bills and shopping. I hadn't agreed to anything like that, and I remembered that for sure. But I nodded, as if trying to remember a non-existent conversation. I'm sorry, son. I've really been a little distracted lately. Their faces lit up. Nothing pleases a predator like the weakness of prey. Don't worry, Dad, Otis opened the folder. I've got it all set up. These documents will give me signature authority on your major accounts. Just to help with the bills, of course. I took the papers, pretending to study them, though I was actually quickly taking pictures of each page on my phone, holding it at an angle invisible to them. The paperwork was professionally done. Power of attorney to manage finances, medical directives, even preliminary paperwork for the possible appointment of a guardian. It had all been prepared by Morris Frindle's office, my former attorney, a man I'd trusted for 30 years. It looks thorough, I commented, handing the folder back. We just want to make sure you're taken care of if anything happens, Octavia said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I noticed something else about the paperwork. Several forms already contained my signature, a signature I'd never put on it. A good forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. Otis had access to a lot of my signed documents over the years, and obviously he'd taken advantage of that. You know, I appreciate your concern, I said, deciding to see how far they were willing to go. But I think I need to show these documents to my lawyer before I sign anything. Otis tensed. Morris already approved all of this, Dad. He said it's all completely in your best interest. Still, I'd like to consult with someone else. Hector Price, perhaps. Hector? Otis snorted. He's been retired for what, 5 years? He's been out of practice for a long time, Dad. Morris is much more competent in modern law. I shrugged. You're probably right. I just need some time to think it over. Octavia put her hand over mine. Her nails dug into my skin a little harder than necessary. Rowan, you do realize we're doing this out of love for you, right? We just want to make sure you're protected. Protected from what? I asked innocently. They exchanged quick glances. From crooks, Dad, Otis replied. You don't realize how many elderly people fall victim to financial scams. The irony of the situation didn't escape me, but I kept a serious expression on my face. Thank you for your concern. Let's do this. I'll take a day or two to think it over, okay? They reluctantly agreed, but I could see the disappointment on their faces. They were hoping to leave today with signed documents. After they left, I immediately called Hector. We needed to meet as soon as possible. Hector Price had chosen a small cafe in Santa Monica, far enough away from Malibu to minimize the chance of running into someone I knew. I arrived 15 minutes ahead of schedule and chose a table in the far corner where I had a good view of the entrance. Hector showed up at exactly the right time, a tall, lean man with a mop of gray hair and shrewd blue eyes. At 72, he moved with the energy of a man half his age. Rowan, he shook my hand firmly and sat down across from me. From the sound of your voice on the phone, this is a serious matter. I pulled out my phone and showed him the pictures of the documents Otis had brought. Hector studied them, and his face grew more grim with each scrolling photo. This is a serious offense, he said finally. Forging a signature on legal documents is a felony. And Morris, I'm disappointed. We went to law school together. What do I do, Hector? He folded his hands in front of him. First, we need to understand how much damage has already been done. These documents have been prepared, but are they officially signed? Are they notarized? Are they filed in court? I shook my head. I don't know. I only learned of their existence yesterday. Then we need to do a thorough check. I'll contact a few people I know at the county courthouse, see if any petitions for custody have been filed. We also need to check your bank accounts for unauthorized activity. I've already found some strange transactions. I informed him of the transfers I'd discovered. Hector rubbed his chin thoughtfully. We need to act quickly, but carefully. If Otis realizes you suspect something, he may accelerate his plans. What do you suggest? I have a few ideas. Hector pulled out a notepad and began to write. First, we need to protect your major assets. How much cash do you have that you can access immediately without attracting attention? I named an amount that made Hector whistle. Okay, that gives us room for maneuver. Here's what we'll do. Over the next 2 hours, we devised a plan. It was risky, requiring precise execution and absolute secrecy. But if it worked, it would not only protect my assets, but it would teach Otis and Octavia a lesson they would never forget. The hardest part, Hector said as we were finishing up, will be pretending you don't suspect anything. You have to gradually give in to them, make them believe their plan is working. I can do that, I replied confidently. After all, I spent decades negotiating with people who wanted to trick me. I just never thought my own son would be among them. Hector squeezed my shoulder sympathetically. It's hard, buddy, but you're a strong man. And remember, you're not alone in this struggle. We parted with an agreement to meet in 3 days to begin our plan. On the drive home, I reflected on what had brought Otis and I to this point. Where had I gone wrong as a father? Or was greed just part of his nature? I remembered how as a child he always wanted more. More toys than other kids, more attention, more praise. Lillian said I spoiled him, but I wanted him to have everything I didn't have as a child. Maybe I overdid it, or maybe some people are just never satisfied with what they have. At home, I found a voicemail message from Otis. Dad, I hope you thought about those papers. I'll stop by tomorrow to pick them up. It's really in your best interest. I smiled to myself. It was time to start the game. The next day, Otis showed up at 2 o'clock sharp, this time without Octavia. He looked smug, even slightly condescending, when I invited him into the living room. Have you thought about our conversations yesterday, Dad? He asked, wasting no time in greeting me. I nodded, trying to look slightly embarrassed and vulnerable. Yes, son. Yeah, I understand that you and Octavia want what's best for you. His face brightened. That's exactly right, Dad. We just want to help. I'll sign the papers, I said, watching his pupils dilate with anticipation. But not all at once. Let's start with the power of attorney to manage the accounts. The rest can be finalized later. Otis quickly pulled a folder from his briefcase. Sure, Dad, whatever you say. There's no rush. But his hands trembling with impatience said otherwise. I slowly went through the documents, pretending to scrutinize them, even though I already knew every line thanks to the pictures I'd taken. Then signed the power of attorney form that authorized Otis to sign over my major bank accounts. Here, I said, handing him the signed document. Now you can help me with paying my bills. Otis could barely contain his triumph. It's the right decision, Dad. You'll see how much easier things will become. I'm sure it will, I replied, thinking to myself that he had no idea how much easier I had made it for him. After Otis left, I immediately called Hector. The first part of the plan is done. He's taken the bait. Great, Hector replied. Now we need to speed things up. I've already contacted the bank and prepared all the necessary paperwork. We'll meet tomorrow morning as agreed. I spent the next few days following Hector's instructions. We opened new accounts at different banks, transferred a large portion of my assets into a new limited liability company set up in Hector's name, and prepared the legal documents that would secure my assets. The hardest part was maintaining a semblance of normality when dealing with Otis. I gradually ceded control of more and more of my financial affairs to him, signed more and more documents he brought in, and even started complaining about memory problems I didn't have. You know, Dad, Otis said during one of his visits, maybe you should think about moving to a place with more appropriate care. Your house is too big for one person, and it's hard to take care of. You mean a nursing home? I asked, letting my voice shake. No, Otis quickly objected. A community for active retirees. They have medical staff, social activities, everything you need. What happens to my house? I specifically asked the question to see his reaction. Otis shrugged with feigned indifference. We could sell it. Real estate in Malibu is at a premium right now. The money would go to pay for your stay in the community and whatever else you need. I nodded, as if seriously considering his offer. Maybe you're right. I'm getting too old for this place. Otis was literally glowing with pleasure. His plan was working even better than he'd expected. His naive, gullible father was giving up without a fight. If only he knew the truth. If only he knew that while he was making plans to sell my house, I'd already transferred the title to the property into a trust controlled by Hector. If only he knew that every signature I'd put on his deeds had been carefully photographed and sent to the team of lawyers Hector had hired to prepare a financial fraud case. If he'd known that the very day he'd talked about selling my house, I'd signed documents transferring the controlling interest in Crystal Clear, which I still owned, to a closed trust whose beneficiary was myself, and after my death, several charitable organizations. But not Otis. I'll think about your offer to move, I promised him with the sincerest smile I was capable of. Great, Dad. Octavia has already found some great options. We can look at them next week. Sure, son, I replied, knowing that by next week, his whole elaborate plan would collapse like a house of cards. When Otis left, I sat on the veranda with a glass of whiskey and looked out at the ocean. The waves were choppy today, and so were my thoughts. What I was doing was necessary, but it didn't bring me joy. My only son had betrayed me for money. It was a bitter pill to swallow. The phone rang. It was Hector. It's all set, Rowan. The papers have been filed. The assets are protected. Now all we have to do is wait for him to make his move. Do you think it won't be long? I asked. From what you're telling me, he's getting more and more impatient. I'd say in the next few days he's going to try to get full control. I took a sip of whiskey, feeling the liquid burn my throat. Then we'll be ready. Hector was quiet for a moment. Rowan, I have to ask again. Are you sure you want to go all the way? This is your son after all. I closed my eyes, visualizing Lillian's face. What would she say about what our son had become? What would she advise me to do? I'm sure you would, Hector. Otis needs to learn a lesson. Some things can't be bought or stolen. They have to be earned. Very well, Hector replied. Then let it go like this. Keep the phone on. When he makes his move, we'll need to act fast. I hung up the phone and continued to stare out at the ocean. Now all I had to do was wait and continue playing the role of a helpless old man who was unaware of the treachery that was brewing. But behind that mask was a man ready to fight. A man who would not allow his own son to rob him of his dignity and everything he had earned in his life. Otis would soon learn that his father was not as easy prey as he thought. 3 weeks passed in a strange silence. Otis called every day, inquiring about my well-being, asking if I needed anything, reminding me of the active retirement communities we were supposedly going to visit. I maintained a semblance of interest, saying I was thinking of selling my house, complaining about being tired and forgetful. I played the role they wanted to see, that of a helpless old man unable to take care of himself. Backstage, however, I was incredibly busy. Together with Hector, we were methodically executing our plan to protect my assets. A new limited liability company, Tidal Investments, now owned most of my assets. On paper, Hector was the sole owner, but we signed confidential agreements ensuring everything was under my control. I also hired a private investigator, Verna Lloyd, a petite woman with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to see right through you. She specialized in cases of financial fraud against the elderly. Mr. Hammond, she said during our first meeting, what your son is doing is unfortunately not uncommon. I've seen hundreds of similar cases. And what is usually the outcome? I asked. She shrugged. Honestly, most victims don't fight back. They either don't realize what's happening or are too emotionally attached to their relatives to confront them. You're a rare exception. Verna examined all the documents I signed for Otis and found that some of the signatures were obviously forged. She also traced the strange transactions in my accounts. They led to a series of new accounts opened in Otis and Octavia's names at a bank where I'd never had an account. They're preparing for a major transfer, she said, looking through the records. Apparently, they plan to transfer a significant amount of money in the near future. I nodded. And when they do, we'll be ready. Hector had prepared legal documents proving fraud. Verna gathered evidence of document forgery. We hired the best criminal defense attorney in Los Angeles, who kept all the paperwork ready. Everything was ready. All we had to do was wait for Otis to make his move. On that overcast Tuesday morning, I sat on the veranda, sipping coffee and watching the fog roll in over the ocean. There was a kind of eerie beauty in the way the gray clouds merged with the gray water, creating the illusion of infinity. I thought of Lillian, how she loved such foggy mornings. Time stops on days like this, Rowan, she used to say. My phone vibrated, interrupting my musings. A message from Otis. Your country house and car are sold. Goodbye. I stared at the screen, feeling a strange mixture of anger and some perverse relief rise up inside. Finally, he'd made his move. I pressed the call button, and Otis answered after the first beep. Dad, he said with feigned regret in his voice, I was just about to call you. I got your message, I said, trying to make my voice sound confused and scared. What's going on, Otis? What do you mean my house and car are sold? Dad, it was necessary. His voice now sounded like he was explaining something to a child. Your health is declining. You've admitted that yourself. We found a great place in a retirement community in Pasadena. You'll be supervised. There are nurses there. But my house, my car, I let my voice waver. How could you sell them without my knowledge? I have power of attorney, Dad. You signed it, remember? It was necessary for your own good. The money from the sale will go to pay for your stay in the community. I took a deep breath, as if trying to calm myself down. How much did you get for the house? A pause. $2,700,000. A good price in the current market conditions. The real value of my house in Malibu was closer to $4 million. He'd either underpriced it or embezzled some of the money. It didn't matter anymore, though. You left something out, I pronounced calmly. What are you talking about? A note of concern appeared in his voice. I laughed loudly and hung up the phone. The phone immediately rang again, but I didn't answer it. Instead, I dialed Hector's number. They did it, I said as soon as he answered. Otis claims he sold my house and car. We're ready, Hector replied confidently. I've already called our lawyers. They're filing the paperwork right now. Meet me in my office in an hour. I hung up the phone and looked out at the ocean. The fog was beginning to clear, allowing the sun's rays to break through the clouds. Symbolic, I thought. As I was leaving the house, the phone rang again. This time it was Octavia. I decided to answer it. Rowan, her voice sounded strained. What did you mean when you told Otis that he left something out? What were you talking about? You'll find out tomorrow, Octavia. I'm sure it will be a surprise. Look, Rowan, her tone became more aggressive. It's already done. The papers have been signed. The house is sold. The car is too. We'll pick you up tomorrow morning and take you to Pasadena. I'll look forward to it, I replied and hung up. The phone rang again, but I turned it off. It was time to act. Hector's office was in a small but elegant building in the Santa Monica business district. When I arrived, a small group of people were already gathered there. Hector himself, Verna Lloyd, and two men in strict suits I didn't know. Rowan, Hector introduced the strangers to me. This is Emmett Lowe, a bank fraud specialist, and Noel Parker, our criminal defense attorney. We exchanged handshakes and Hector invited everyone into the conference room. On a large screen on the wall, a document with a detailed plan of action was open. So, gentlemen and lady, Hector began, the time has come. Otis Hammond has made his move. Now it's our turn. He turned to Emmett. What's going on with the bank transfers? Emmett opened his laptop. $2,700,000 was withdrawn from Mr. Hammond's main account this morning. The money was transferred to a Wells Fargo bank account opened in Otis Hammond's name. And my real home? I asked. According to the county registry records, Verna replied as she looked at the documents on her tablet. The house at 27 Ocean View Drive, Malibu, was sold this morning to Pacific Holdings for the sum of $2,700,000. The papers were signed by Otis Hammond as trustee. Pacific Holdings. I looked at Hector. Is that a shell company? He nodded. Most likely. We're checking, but I'm pretty sure its owners are Otis and Octavia. They sold your house to themselves at an undervalued price, probably to save on taxes. What about the car? Your Mercedes was sold to a dealership in Long Beach for $95,000, Verna reported. Again, the paperwork is signed by Otis Hammond. I shook my head. The car is worth at least $130,000. They were in a hurry, Hector remarked, and probably got some of the money in cash. So what now? I asked, looking at everyone present. Hector smiled. Now we show our hand. Noel, the criminal defense attorney, opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. This morning I filed a petition for an injunction against all transactions involving Mr. Hammond's assets. I've also filed a report of fraud and financial abuse of an elderly person with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Given the evidence we've gathered, they've already launched an investigation. What about the power of attorney I signed? I asked. It's been revoked, Noel replied. We have evidence that your signature on many of the documents has been forged. In addition, we allege that the power of attorney was obtained fraudulently using false claims about your mental state. And my house and car? Legally speaking, Hector said, they cannot be sold without your present consent. Given that the power of attorney is revoked, the sale is invalid. But even if the power of attorney were valid, it didn't give Otis the right to dispose of your real estate without your express permission. But the money has already been transferred, right? Emmett grinned. That's the most interesting part. Remember the new accounts we set up? The bank got a notice of possible fraud and froze the funds. Otis can't access the money from the sale. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the tension of the last few weeks begin to let go. So what now? We just wait for it to be resolved in court? Hector shook his head. Not exactly. There's something else you should know about Rowan. Do you remember the papers you signed for Otis? Of course. We did a little modified some of them before you signed them. The last few pages, which Otis probably didn't even read, contain an admission of attempted fraud. I stared at him. What? In what way? Remember the paragraph that talked about admitting full responsibility for all acts done in your name? We changed the wording. It now says Otis admits that he's acting without your true consent and with the intent to misappropriate your assets. And he signed it? He and Octavia, both of them. Notarized. I couldn't contain my laughter. Hector, you sly old fox. I prefer the term thorough lawyer, he smiled. Noel coughed. There's something else, Mr. Hammond. We've discovered that this isn't the first time your son has tried to defraud an elderly person. 2 years ago, he was involved in a similar scheme with his father-in-law, Octavia's father. The case was settled out of court, and all of his records were sealed. But we got access to them through the court. This news shocked me. His father-in-law? I thought Octavia's parents died in a car accident. Her mother did, Verna confirmed. But her father, Percival Q, is alive and well. He lives in a nursing home in San Diego. Otis and Octavia told everyone that he died after trying to gain control of his finances. I shook my head, trying to realize the extent of the deception. So that was their plan all along. Looks like it, Hector agreed. They pick seniors with significant assets, isolate them, and then try to gain control of their finances. A classic scheme of financial abuse of the elderly. So now what? I asked again. Now, Noel said, standing up. We wait. The bailiffs are already serving summonses on Otis and Octavia. Their accounts should be frozen by now. We have a court hearing tomorrow morning where we'll request a permanent injunction and the return of all misappropriated assets. What about criminal charges? I asked. That's up to the prosecutor's office, Noel replied. But with the evidence we have, I'd say the chances of charges are pretty high. I glanced at my watch. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So Otis and Octavia should have gotten the subpoenas by now. If they haven't, they will in the next hour, Noel confirmed. As if on cue, my phone, which I'd turned on again before arriving at Hector's office, rang. Otis's number. I showed the screen to the others. Answer it, Hector suggested. But be careful what you say. Anything you say can be used in court. I nodded and hit the answer button, putting me on speakerphone. Yes, Otis. What the hell did you do? My son's voice was distorted with rage. We just had some people came in with papers. They say all our accounts are frozen. What the hell kind of games are these, Dad? Not games, Otis, I replied calmly. Just a little lesson. A lesson? Are you out of your mind? Do you know what you're doing? I know perfectly well. What you didn't seem to know is that I'm not the helpless old man you thought I was. Look, Papa, his tone suddenly changed, becoming almost pleading. There's some misunderstanding. Octavia and I only wanted to help. Everything we did was for your own good. Like for the good of Octavia's father, Percival, I asked. The same one you put in a nursing home in San Diego and told everyone he was dead? There was a long pause. Where you're coming from? That's different. No, Otis, it's exactly the same. And you know what the saddest part is? I'd help you if you just ask. I would have given you the money if you needed it that badly. But you decided to steal it. I didn't steal anything, he shouted. I have power of attorney. It's all legal. A power of attorney obtained by fraud is invalid, I replied calmly. Besides, it doesn't give you the right to sell my real estate. This is all because of Hector, isn't it? I could hear the panic in Otis's voice. He's always hated me. He turned you against me. Hector had nothing to do with it. It's all you're doing, son, from start to finish. Dad, please, he begged frankly now. We can fix this. Drop the lawsuits, forget about it. We're a family, remember? Family doesn't steal from each other, Otis. My voice was firm. Family doesn't lie or manipulate. And a family doesn't try to send their relatives to a nursing home to get their money. What do you want me to do? You could hear the desperation in his voice. Tell me what I can do to fix this? Nothing, Otis. It's too late now. I'll see you in court. I pressed the end call button and placed the phone on the table. There was silence in the room. Are you okay? Hector finally asked. I took a deep breath. Yes, number. I don't. This is my son, Hector. No matter what he does, he's still my son. Hector put a hand on my shoulder. I know, buddy. And I'm sorry it's come to this. But you did what you had to do. You protected yourself. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of triumph and deep sadness. What's next? Next, Hector said, you go home and get a good night's sleep. We have a long day in court tomorrow. I stood up, thanked everyone for their work, and headed for the exit. On the threshold, I turned around. Hector, do you think they'll be here tomorrow? Otis and Octavia? Hector shrugged. It's hard to say. If they have a good lawyer, he'll advise them to show up and look remorseful. But from what I know of them, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to escape. Escape? They still have access to some of the funds we couldn't freeze. Not much, but enough to disappear for a while. I shook my head. No, Otis is too proud for that. He'll come and fight. And he'll lose. You're probably right, Hector agreed. You know him better than anyone. I walked out of the building and got into the cab I'd ordered in advance. On the way home, I looked at the palm trees whizzing by and thought about how things had come to this. Where had I gone wrong as a father? Was Otis's greed something I could have prevented, or was it just part of his nature? As the cab pulled up to my house, I noticed Octavia's car parked in the driveway. They were waiting for me. I motioned for the driver to stop at the street corner. Excuse me, sir, I said. I seem to have some unexpected guests. Could you please take me to the Shorecrest Hotel in Santa Monica? Certainly, sir, the driver replied, turning the car around. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Hector's number. They're at my house, I said when he answered. That's what I thought, he replied. Don't interact with them without a lawyer. Where are you now? On my way to Shorecrest. I'm going to spend the night there. Good idea. I'll call the sheriff and have them send a car to your house. If Otis and Octavia try to remove anything or damage property, they'll be arrested. Thanks, Hector. You're welcome, buddy. Hang in there. This will all be over tomorrow. I hung up the phone and leaned back in the cab seat. Tomorrow. Tomorrow my son and his wife would face the consequences of their actions. And while part of me felt satisfaction at the thought that justice would be served, another part of me mourned the relationship that was now irrevocably broken. But I knew I had done the right thing. I had protected myself from those who tried to use me. I had shown that even at 67, I was still capable of standing up for myself. And perhaps most importantly, I had taught Otis a lesson he would never forget. Never underestimate your opponent, even if that opponent is your own father. I woke up in my hotel room to the alarm clock on my phone ringing. 6 in the morning. It was just starting to get light outside the window, the gray pre-dawn light filtering through the loose curtains. I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept in a hotel. Must have been a few years ago, when I traveled to San Francisco for a conference of small business owners. Stretching, I got out of bed. Despite the stress of the previous day, I slept surprisingly well. Perhaps because for the first time in months, I felt like I was regaining control of my life. My phone vibrated, a message from Hector. The sheriff's car was outside your house all night. Otis and Octavia stayed there until midnight, then left. Everything's quiet. Court's in session at 10:30. Meet me at the courthouse at 9:45. I showered, dressed in the suit I'd thoughtfully brought with me the day before, and went down to the hotel restaurant. I didn't have much of an appetite, but I forced myself to eat some scrambled eggs and drink a cup of coffee. I was going to need my strength today. At 9:30, the cab dropped me off at the Los Angeles County Courthouse, a grand Art Deco building in the center of the city. Hector was already waiting on the steps, dressed in an immaculate navy blue suit. Standing next to him was Noel Parker, our criminal defense attorney. Ready for a fight? Hector asked, shaking my hand. As ready as I can be, I replied. We walked up the steps and through the metal detectors at the entrance. Inside, the courthouse was a beehive of activity, with people in business suits with files and briefcases in their hands. Noel led us to the third-floor courtroom, where our hearing was to take place. The room was almost empty when we entered. A few clerks were preparing documents. A young woman was setting up microphones. We took seats at the plaintiff's table. What's going to happen today? I asked Noel. Today is the preliminary hearing, he explained. The judge will consider our motion for a permanent injunction and set a date for a full trial. The issue of keeping the freeze on Otis and Octavia's accounts will also be decided. Will they be here? They should be. Their lawyer will definitely be, Noel replied. Hector put a hand on my shoulder. Don't worry, Rowan. We have an ironclad case. At that moment, the hall doors opened and Otis and Octavia walked in, accompanied by a man I didn't know, obviously their lawyer. Otis looked pale and gaunt, as if he had been up all night. Octavia, on the other hand, held herself with defiant dignity, chin high. They took seats at the defendant's table without looking in our direction. Their lawyer, however, approached us. Charles Woodward, he introduced himself. Dash Mr. and Mrs. Hammond's attorney. Noel shook his hand. Noel Parker. Mr. Parker, Woodward continued, my clients are interested in settling this case out of court. Perhaps we could discuss terms? Noel looked at me, and I shook my head negatively. I'm afraid that's not possible, Noel replied. My client insists on a full trial. Woodward pressed his lips together. Mr. Parker, it's in the best interest of all parties to avoid a public scandal, especially given the family ties. Family ties didn't stop your clients from trying to rob mine, Noel parried. Woodward sighed. Very well, but my offer stands. He walked back to the defendant's desk and said something quietly to Otis. My son threw me a look full of a mixture of anger and fear. I endured that look without averting my eyes until he turned away first. At exactly 10:30, the door behind the judge's seat opened, and the judge walked in. A short, full man with balding hair and penetrating eyes. All rise, the Honorable Judge Richard Holt presiding, announced the bailiff. Everyone stood up. The judge took his seat and announced, be seated. Case number 43,265 fraction 2025. Hammond v. Hammond. Preliminary injunction hearing. Noel stood up. Noel Parker, representing the plaintiff, Rowan Hammond. Charles Woodward, representing the defendants, Otis and Octavia Hammond. The attorney on the opposite side stood up. Judge Holt looked over the documents in front of him. So, Mr. Parker, are you alleging that the defendants fraudulently obtained power of attorney from the plaintiff and used it to misappropriate his property, including the sale of real estate and a vehicle without his knowledge or consent? Quite correct, Your Honor. And you are asking for a permanent injunction prohibiting the defendants from disposing of any of the plaintiff's property, as well as maintaining a freeze on their accounts until the end of the proceedings? Yes, Your Honor. The judge turned to Woodward. Mr. Woodward, defense position? Woodward stood up. Your Honor, my clients categorically deny all charges. The power of attorney was legally obtained with the full and informed consent of the plaintiff. Mr. Otis Hammond was acting solely in the best interests of his father, who, due to age and health, is incapable of managing his own finances. I felt the blood rush to my face with indignation, but Hector squeezed my shoulder warningly, urging me to remain calm. Do you have evidence of the plaintiff's incapacity, Mr. Woodward? The judge asked. We are prepared to provide a medical report. From what doctor? Interrupted the judge. Woodward hesitated. We're in the process of obtaining a formal report, Your Honor. So you don't have one, the judge stated. Mr. Parker, your objection? Noel stood up. Your Honor, Mr. Hammond is fully competent, as evidenced by the report of an independent psychiatrist, Dr. Sarah Freeman, a copy of which is attached to our motion. Moreover, we have evidence that the defendants have systematically attempted to portray Mr. Hammond as incompetent, including forging his signature on a number of documents. The judge looked at some more papers. I also see a statement that the defendants have signed documents admitting to attempted fraud. Is that correct, Mr. Parker? Yes, Your Honor. When the defendants thought they were processing the sale of the plaintiff's property, they inadvertently signed documents admitting to attempted financial fraud against an elderly person. This is absurd, Otis exclaimed, jumping up from his seat. Silence in the courtroom, said the judge sternly. Mr. Woodward, control your client. Woodward hissed something to Otis, and he reluctantly sat down. Mr. Woodward, your answer to this charge? The judge continued. Your Honor, if such documents exist, they were obtained fraudulently. My clients would never sign a confession to a crime they did not commit. I see, the judge nodded. Mr. Parker, do you have these documents? Noel handed the judge a folder. Right here, Your Honor. Notice the defendant's signatures on page 7 and 8, notarized. The judge studied the documents, then looked up. Mr. and Mrs. Hammond, do you admit that these are your signatures? Woodward tried to answer, but the judge stopped him. I want to hear from the defendants themselves. Otis and Octavia looked at each other. Then Otis reluctantly stood up. Yes, that's my signature, Your Honor. But I didn't read what I signed. I was told it was standard estate sale paperwork. Told by whom? The judge clarified. A notary, or a person who identified himself as a notary. The judge looked at him skeptically. Mr. Hammond, you are a stock analyst, correct? Yes, Your Honor. And in your professional life, you deal with legal documents on a regular basis? Yes, but... And yet you signed a legal document without reading it? Otis was silent. Mrs. Hammond, the judge turned to Octavia, is that your signature? Octavia stood up. Yes, Your Honor. But as my husband said, we didn't know what we were signing. The judge sighed. I see. Mr. Parker, what else do you have? Noel presented the rest of the evidence to the court. Forged signatures, strange bank transactions, documents about the sale of the house and car. The longer he spoke, the darker Otis and Octavia's faces became. Finally, the judge announced, I have reviewed the evidence presented and believe that the plaintiff has presented sufficient grounds for a permanent injunction. Defendants are restrained from disposing of any of plaintiff's property, including real estate, vehicles, and financial assets. The freezing of the defendant's accounts shall remain in place until the conclusion of the proceedings. I felt a wave of relief come over me. The first round was upon us. In addition, the judge continued, I am forwarding the case file to the district attorney's office for consideration of filing a criminal complaint for financial fraud against an elderly person. A full trial is set for October 22nd. This concludes the preliminary hearing. The judge banged his gavel, stood up, and left the room. Otis looked like he'd gotten a punch in the solar plexus. Octavia whispered something fiercely in his ear, her face contorted with anger. Woodward approached our table. Mr. Parker, my clients are still open to a pretrial settlement. Perhaps after today's meeting, your client has changed his mind? Noel looked at me. I shook my head. I'm sorry, Mr. Woodward, but my client's position hasn't changed, Noel replied. Woodward pressed his lips together. That's too bad. It would have been better for everyone to resolve this matter quietly. For your clients, perhaps, I replied, but not for me. Woodward turned back to Otis and Octavia. They were arguing quietly but fiercely about something until they noticed me watching them. Otis threw me a hateful look, then grabbed his briefcase and walked quickly out of the room. Octavia followed him without even glancing in my direction. What now? I asked Hector and Noel as we walked out of the courthouse. Now we prepare for a full trial, Noel replied. But after the judge's ruling today, I wouldn't be surprised if the district attorney's office filed charges against them in the next few days. What about my house and car? The sale was invalidated, Hector said. Legally, you still own them. You can come home as early as today. I nodded but felt no particular joy. Victory had a bitter aftertaste. You can go now, I said to Hector and Noel. I need a little time to think. They nodded understandingly, and I was left alone on the courthouse steps. The city around me lived its usual life. People hurried about their business, cars drove through the streets, and somewhere in the distance, an ambulance siren cut through the city noise. No one noticed the elderly man who had just won a battle against his own son. I decided to walk to the nearest park. I needed to get my thoughts in order before returning home. Pershing Square Park was an oasis of green in the middle of the concrete jungle of downtown. I found a vacant bench in the shade of a large tree and sat down, watching the children playing on the playground nearby. Their carefree laughter made me think of Otis as a child, a little boy with bright eyes and a wide smile, excited to show me his drawings and crafts from school. When did it all go wrong? When did my son turn into a man capable of betraying his own father for money? Was it my fault or just his choice? I was so immersed in my thoughts that I didn't immediately notice someone sitting down next to me on the bench. Turning around, I was surprised to see Octavia. What are you doing here? I asked, instinctively moving away. She was staring straight ahead, not turning toward me. I followed you from the courthouse. I need to talk to you. Where's Otis? Gone with Charles. He doesn't know I'm here. I remained silent, waiting to see what she would say next. You ruined us, she said quietly, but with fury in her voice. Our reputations, our careers, our futures, all destroyed. You destroyed everything yourself, I replied, by your own actions. She finally turned to me. You don't understand. We had no choice. There is always a choice, Octavia. Not when you owe millions. Her voice shook. Otis had made some bad investments, major failed investments. We were on the verge of bankruptcy. This news caught me off guard. Why didn't he come to me? I would have helped him. She grinned bitterly. Pride. He couldn't admit to his successful father that he'd failed. So he chose to steal from me instead? He preferred to call it borrowing. We were going to give it all back. One day. I shook my head. And you believe that? She averted her gaze. I believe we had no other choice, especially after my father refused to help. Your father, who you put in a nursing home and told everyone he was dead? Her face contorted. That was Otis's idea. I just didn't object strongly enough. We sat in silence, watching the children playing. What do you want from me, Octavia? I finally asked. Drop the lawsuit, she said. Give us a chance to make things right. How? We'll pay back everything we took. We'll find a way to pay off our debts. We'll start over. I sighed. What about your father? She lowered her head. Yeah, I'll visit him. I'll apologize. I'll do everything in my power to make things right. And you think that's enough? After everything you've done? No, she answered quietly. But it's a start. I stared at her, trying to see the sincerity in her words. Was this just another manipulation or genuine remorse? I'll think about it, I said finally. But I can't promise anything. She nodded, stood up, and without another word walked away. I remained sitting on the bench, mulling over our conversation. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to give Otis another chance. After all, he was my only son. But the other part remembered the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, remembered how easily they were willing to put me in a nursing home and take everything I'd earned in my life. My phone rang. Hector. Rowan, where are you? I called the hotel. They said you checked out. I'm in Pershing Square Park. Just thinking. Is everything okay? You sound weird. Octavia found me. We talked. A pause. Damn it, Rowan. What were you thinking? You shouldn't be socializing with them without a lawyer. I know. But she said something interesting. Turns out Otis had run up debts. They were on the verge of bankruptcy. And that's why they decided to steal from you? Hector snorted. What an excuse. Not an excuse, I agreed, but an explanation. Hector sighed. Listen, Rowan. Whatever they say now, remember. They've been lying to you for weeks, for months, manipulated you, were willing to leave you penniless. I remember, I replied. It's complicated. Of course it's complicated. He's your son, but don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. They didn't change in one day. I knew Hector was right, but the heart doesn't always listen to reason. I'll be careful, I promised. Thanks for your concern, friend. That's what friends are for. By the way, I checked out your house. It's fine, no damage. You can come back when you're ready. Thanks, Hector. I think I'll be heading home soon. I hung up and sat in the park for a while longer, watching the shadows of the trees lengthen, marking the passage of time. Finally, I got up and hailed a cab. To Malibu, please, I said to the driver, giving the address of my house. On the way, I stared out the window at the city whizzing by, which gradually changed to suburbs and then the coast. As I approached the house, I felt a strange uneasiness. What would I find there? Would it still feel like home after everything that had happened? As the cab pulled up to the gate, I was surprised to see Otis's car parked in the driveway. Wait here, please, I said to the driver. I'll be right back. I walked up to the house and saw Otis sitting on the porch steps. He looked exhausted, suit wrinkled, tie loosened, hair disheveled. What are you doing here? I asked, stopping a few feet away from him. He looked up. Was waiting for you. We need to talk. Octavia already tried. I know. She told me. He stood up. Dad, I screwed up. Screwed up big time. That's putting it mildly. I know what I did is unforgivable. I know you'll never be able to trust me again. But I had to come and say I'm sorry. I stared at him, trying to see the sincerity in his eyes. There was remorse there, yes. But was it because of what he'd done or because he'd been caught? Why didn't you come to me when you started having financial problems? I asked. He lowered his head. Pride. Stupid damn pride. I wanted to be as successful as you. Wanted to make you proud of me. So you decided to steal from me? I was going to give it all back. His voice shook. Dash. I swear, Dad, it would be temporary until I got back on my feet. And sending me to a nursing home was temporary too? He didn't answer. What about Octavia's father? Was that temporary too? Otis swallowed. Yeah, I have no excuses. I've done terrible things. Things I can't undo. Then what do you want from me? I don't know, he answered honestly. I don't deserve forgiveness. A second chance either. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Really sorry. We stood in silence, father and son, separated not only by physical distance, but by a chasm of betrayal that may never be bridged. I can't withdraw the lawsuit, I said finally. You must answer for your actions. He nodded. I understand, but I'll talk to the prosecutor. If you make full restitution, bring Octavia's father home, and cooperate with the investigation, you might be able to avoid jail time. His eyes widened in surprise. You would do that for me? After all I've done? Not for you, I answered. For myself. Because no matter what, you're still my son. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life knowing I sent you to prison, even if you deserved it. Otis nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. Thanks, Dad. Don't thank me. Just fix what you can fix. He nodded again, then slowly turned and walked to his car. I watched him drive away and felt a strange mixture of sadness, anger, and relief. I was back at my house in Malibu after being away for almost 2 days. It was a strange feeling to enter your own home with apprehension, as if it were a foreign place. I walked slowly through the rooms, checking to see if anything had been damaged or stolen. To my relief, everything was still in its place. Even the collection of rare vinyl records I'd collected over decades was untouched. Stepping out onto the veranda, I took a deep breath of salty sea air. The ocean was restless today, the waves crashing against the shore. Their rhythmic sound always calmed me, even in the most difficult times. The phone rang, disturbing the peaceful atmosphere. Hector's number. I'm back home, I said, answering the call. Everything's fine. Glad to hear it, Hector answered. Listen, I've got some news. The DA's office is going to file charges against Otis and Octavia. I just got a call from the assistant district attorney. I sighed. Despite everything they'd done, the thought that my son might end up in jail was painful. How serious are the charges? Fraud, forgery of documents, financial abuse of an elderly person? About 6 counts in all. If they're found guilty on all counts, they could get up to 10 years. 10 years. Otis could walk out of prison a 52-year-old man with a ruined career and the stigma of a convicted felon. Despite his betrayal, the thought hurt me. Any options for a plea deal? I asked. A pause. Rowan, are you sure you want to go that route? After everything they've done? He's still my son, Hector. Hector sighed. I understand. Yes, there are options. If they fully admit guilt, make restitution, and cooperate with the investigation, the prosecutor may consider probation instead of real jail time. Good. Give me the prosecutor's contacts. I want to talk to him in person. Rowan, are you sure that's a good idea? Otis and Octavia don't deserve your leniency. This isn't about what they deserve, Hector. It's about what I can live with. After some hesitation, Hector dictated the number of the assistant district attorney, Rebecca Allen, to me. I thanked him and promised to keep him informed. I spent the evening mulling over the situation. Part of me wanted Otis and Octavia to get what they deserved, to feel the full consequences of their actions. But the other part, the fatherly part, couldn't bear the thought of my only son spending a decade behind bars. In the morning, I called Rebecca Allen and set up a meeting at her office at 3 in the afternoon. Then I dialed Otis's number. He answered after the first beep, as if he'd been sitting with the phone in his hand, waiting for my call. Dad? His voice sounded unsure. Otis, we need to talk. Today. The DA's office is preparing to file charges against you and Octavia. Silence. Then, how bad is it? Bad enough. Up to 10 years in prison. I heard him drawing air sharply. God, what am I supposed to do? Come to my house at noon, alone without Octavia, and no lawyer, just you and me. Yeah, okay, I'll be there at noon. At exactly 12, I heard the sound of a car pulling up. Through the window, I saw Otis park and walk slowly toward the door. He looked even worse than yesterday, haggard with dark circles under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled shirt and no tie. I opened the door before he could ring the bell. Come in. He walked silently into the living room and sat on the couch, staring at the floor. I remained standing, unprepared for physical intimacy, even of the innocent sort like sitting next to him. I have a meeting with the ADA at 3 o'clock. I began without preamble. Before I go there, I want to hear the full truth from you. The whole story, no secrets. Otis looked up. What exactly do you want to know? Everything. When did it start? Why? Who else was involved? He took a deep breath. It started about 2 years ago. I made some risky investments that didn't pan out. Lost almost everything we had with Octavia. We ended up to our eyeballs in debt. And instead of asking for help, you decided to steal from me. He grimaced at my words, but didn't disagree. At first, it was just a thought, a fantasy. What if I had access to your accounts? Then Octavia found out about our financial problems and suggested a plan. Octavia? I was surprised. I'd always assumed Otis was the one who initiated it. Yes, she'd done something like that before with her father. With Percival Q. Otis looked at me in surprise. You know about him? I've learned a lot in the last few weeks, son. He nodded. Octavia convinced me that it would work, that we could get control of your assets, solve our financial problems, and then get everything back. And you believe that? He lowered his head. I wanted to believe it, but deep down inside, I think I knew it was a lie. Who else was involved? Morris Frindle. He agreed to help with the legal side. For a percentage, of course. I shook my head. Morris, my lawyer and supposed friend for 30 years, had betrayed me for money. Who else? No one. Just the three of us. I stared at him, trying to see if he was telling the truth. There was remorse in his eyes, but was it genuine? Or just fear of the consequences? What about Octavia's father? What happened to him? Otis swallowed. About the same thing we planned for you. Octavia got power of attorney, transferred most of his assets, then put him in a nursing home, telling everyone he was suffering from dementia. When he tried to confront her, she threatened him. Threatened? Said that if he told anyone or tried to get his money back, she would ensure that he would be declared incapacitated and placed in a locked facility for the rest of his life. I felt a wave of anger rising inside. And you were okay with that? No. I mean, I didn't know all the details at the time. She told me that her father was really sick and needed care. I didn't find out the truth until later, when we had already started with you. And that didn't stop you. He lowered his head. I was too deeply involved by then. We owed too much money to two dangerous people. Dangerous people? You took money from loan sharks? Not directly. One of my clients. He's connected to certain circles. Offered to help when he heard about my problems. I was desperate enough to accept. So there you have it. Not just debts, but debts to people who don't forgive non-payment. That explained Otis's desperation, his willingness to do anything, even betray his own father. How much do you owe them? 1,700,000, with interest that grows every day, I whistled. And how much time do you have left to pay? 2 weeks. Then they won't be happy. I rubbed my chin thoughtfully. And that's why you sold my house and car. To pay them off. Yeah, the plan was to transfer the money to an offshore account, pay off the debt, and use the rest to start over somewhere far away from here. And what about me? What would become of me after you took all my property and money? Otis didn't answer, avoiding my gaze. Look at me, Otis, I demanded. He slowly raised his eyes, full of shame. What would become of me, I repeated. A nursing home in Pasadena, he answered quietly. We'd pay for the first year. And then? I don't know, Dad. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I was only focused on getting out of this hole. I looked at my son, the man I'd raised, the man I'd given everything I could, the man who was willing to abandon me to my fate to save his own skin. Well, I said at last, at least you're honest. Now, at 3 o'clock, I met with Rebecca Allen, the assistant district attorney. She was a young woman with a keen eye and a determined expression. After listening to my story and my desire to find a solution that didn't include jail time for Otis, she tapped her pen thoughtfully on the table. Mr. Hammond, I understand your feelings, but what your son and his wife did is a serious offense. Financial abuse of the elderly is a growing problem, and we're trying to send a clear message that this behavior will not be tolerated. I completely agree, I replied, and I'm not asking you to drop the charges, only to consider alternatives to incarceration. Perhaps probation, community service, restitution. She hesitated. If they fully admit their guilt, return all misappropriated funds, make restitution, and cooperate in the investigation against others involved, such as Morris Frindle, perhaps we could consider probation for your son. But as for his wife, given her previous actions with her own father, I'm not sure I can be as lenient. I understand, I nodded, and I'm not asking for special treatment for Octavia, only to Otis. When I got home, Hector was already waiting for me. How did it go? He asked. Not bad, I replied. There's a chance Otis will get probation if he cooperates fully. About Octavia, the prosecutor is less optimistic. Not surprising, given her history, Hector remarked. At that moment, my phone rang. Otis. Dad, his voice sounded strained. We have a problem. Octavia found out about our conversation. She's furious, threatening everyone. Me, you, even Hector. Where is she now? I don't know. She ran out of the house taking her passport and some papers. I'm afraid she might try to escape, or do something worse. Have you notified the police? Yes, just now. They promised to send a patrol to your house. Dad, be careful. She's not herself. After talking to Otis, Hector and I stepped up security measures. We checked all the locks, activated the alarm system, which I rarely used, and prepared for a possible visit from unwanted guests. Around 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. Hector and I looked at each other. Are you expecting someone? He asked. I shook my head and cautiously approached the door. Through the peephole, I saw Octavia. She looked disheveled, her makeup smeared, a feverish glint in her eyes. It's Octavia, I whispered to Hector. She's alone. Hector pulled out his cell phone. I'll call the police. Wait, I stopped him. Let's find out what she wants first. I opened the door but left the chain out. What do you want, Octavia? To talk. Her voice sounded strangely calm. Just to talk, Rowan. About what? About what you're doing. About how you're ruining our lives. Let me in, please. I'm unarmed, I swear. I hesitated. Hector shook his head negatively, but I decided to take my chances. Removing the chain, I opened the door. Come on in. But keep in mind, Hector's here, and the police are on their way. She walked in, looking around. The police? Why? I haven't done anything. You haven't yet, Hector remarked, holding the phone at the ready. Octavia ignored him and turned to me. Rowan, you have to stop this. Drop the charges. It's out of my hands, Octavia. The case is already in the hands of the prosecutor's office. But you can influence them. Her voice rose higher. You can say that it was a misunderstanding, that you yourself gave Otis permission to sell the house. I will not lie for you, Octavia. Her face contorted with anger. You don't understand. If we go to jail, it's all over. Not just for us, but for you. Is that a threat? I asked calmly. It's a fact, she exclaimed. I have connections, Rowan. People who will stop at nothing to protect their interests, and their interests are tied to mine right now. People to whom Otis owes money? She blinked in surprise. He told you. He told me everything, Octavia. About the debts, about your plan, about what you did to your father. She clenched her fists. You don't understand anything. My father deserved what he got. He was always controlling me, always telling me I wasn't good enough. And now you're doing the same thing to Otis. I never controlled Otis. I've always given him the freedom to choose. Lies, she shouted. You were always hovering over him, always so successful, so perfect. How could he ever live up to that? How could he admit to you that he was a failure? I was struck by the intensity of her emotion. Was it genuine pain or just another manipulation? Octavia, I said softly, whatever happened between you and your father, it doesn't excuse what you did to me. and to him. "You don't know anything about us." She took a step toward me, and I noticed her hand slipping into her pocket. "You're just an old man who stands in our way." Hector was instantly between us. "That's enough, Octavia. Take your hand out of your pocket." Slowly, her eyes narrowed. "Or what? Are you going to call the police? They're on their way, remember?" At that moment, I noticed the flashing blue lights through the window. The police car pulled up to the house. Octavia saw them too, her face contorted with panic. "No!" she exclaimed. "I can't! I'm not going to jail!" She snatched something from her pocket, a small pistol. Hector reacted instantly, lunging forward and intercepting her arm. They struggled, and I heard a shot. Then the police burst into the house. "Police! Everybody on the floor! Guns on the floor!" It was like it was all happening in slow motion. Octavia was pinned to the floor and disarmed. Hector, holding her shoulder, slumped on the couch. I rushed over to him. "Hector! Are you hurt?" "A scratch," he grumbled. "The bullet only grazed it." The medics arrived a few minutes later. While they examined Hector, the police officers read Octavia her rights. She didn't resist, her gaze blank, absent. "You'll need a few stitches, but nothing serious," one of the medics told Hector. "We'll take you to the hospital." I insisted on going with him. On the way, I called Otis and briefly told him what had happened. He was shocked. "She really tried to shoot you?" "At me or at Hector, I'm not sure. But yes, she did shoot." Silence. Then, "I didn't know she was capable of that." "I swear, Dad, I didn't know." "I believe you, Otis. What do I do?" "Continue to cooperate with the police and the prosecutor's office. Tell them everything you know. Take care of Octavia's father. He deserves better." "I will, Dad. I promise." At the hospital, Hector got stitches, and the doctors said he could go home as early as tomorrow. I stayed with him, sitting in an uncomfortable chair by his bedside. "You saved my life," I said when we were alone. "How can I ever thank you?" Hector smiled weakly. "Just promise me that the next time I say, 'Don't open the door,' you'll listen." I laughed. "I promise." The next day, we learned that Octavia had been additionally charged with assault with a firearm and attempted murder. Otis, as promised, had cooperated fully with the authorities, providing all the evidence against Morris Frindle and detailing the scheme they were planning. The prosecutor's office, given his cooperation, agreed to a deal. 5 years probation, a substantial fine, and mandatory community service with organizations that help the elderly. He also had to return all misappropriated funds and publicly plead guilty. Octavia, who refused to cooperate, received 15 years in prison. When all the formalities were settled, I invited Hector to my house. We sat on the veranda, watching the sunset over the ocean and sipping whiskey. "You know," Hector said, "when you first told me about your suspicions about Otis, I didn't think it would go this far." "Neither did I admitted. I hoped I was wrong. That my son wasn't capable of such a betrayal." "What will you do now?" "Will you ever be able to trust him again?" I wondered. Trust, it's complicated. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully trust him again. But he's still my son, and I'm going to give him a chance to make it right. What about you? What are your plans? I smiled. I'm thinking about traveling. Always wanted to see Europe, but never found the time. Maybe now is the time. Hector raised his glass. Here's to new beginnings. I clinked my glass with his. To new beginnings. And here's to old friends who stick around during hard times. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of the sun disappear over the horizon. I thought about what I had been through, the betrayal and the pain, but also the strength I had discovered in myself. The strength to stand up to those who tried to use me, even if they were the people closest to me. Do you know what the most ironic thing about all of this is? I asked Hector. What? If Otis had just come to me and been honest about his problems, I would have helped him. Without all the scheming, without the betrayal, I was always willing to support him. Hector nodded. Perhaps he'll realize that someday. Perhaps. In the meantime, I will live my life without letting bitterness and disappointment determine my future. That's a wise approach, Rowan. I took a sip of whiskey, feeling the warmth spill over my body. Not wisdom, Hector. just a desire to be happy no matter what. It had been 3 months since the day Octavia had tried to shoot me in my own home. It was an unusually warm fall in Malibu. The sun was still warm, but the ocean breeze was already bringing a chill, a reminder of winter's imminent arrival. I was sitting in the office of my lawyer, Neil Carmichael, whom I'd found on Hector's recommendation after Morris Frindle had been disbarred and was under investigation for accessory to fraud. "So, Mr. Hammond, all the paperwork is ready." Neil laid out the folders of paperwork in front of me. "Selling your current house, buying a new one, changing all your contact information, new bank accounts, everything you asked for." I nodded, looking through the paperwork. The decision to sell the house I'd lived in for the past 3 years hadn't come easily to me, but I couldn't stay in a place where so many unpleasant things had happened. Every time I entered the living room, I remembered Octavia with a gun in her hand. Every time I sat on the veranda, I thought of those conversations with Otis that ended up being just part of his plan to take my money. "What about the legal restrictions?" I asked. "You said additional steps could be taken." Neil pulled out another folder. "Yes, we've prepared an injunction. If the court approves it, neither Otis nor Octavia will be able to come within 500 meters of you. Given the circumstances of the case, I'm sure the judge will approve the request." "Very well. Mr. Hammond, if I may ask a personal question." Neil looked a little unsure. "Are you sure you want to completely sever your relationship with your son, even after he cooperated with the investigation and only got probation?" I sighed. It was a question I'd asked myself every day for the past 3 months. Every time the phone rang and Otis's name popped up on the screen. Every time a text message came through apologizing and asking for a meeting. "Yes, I'm sure," I answered firmly. What Otis did can't just be forgiven and forgotten. He didn't just try to steal my money. He planned to rob me of my freedom, my dignity, everything I'd earned in my life. And although he cooperated with the investigation, I'm convinced it was out of fear of prison, not genuine remorse. "I understand," Neil nodded. "I just wanted to make sure you'd thought it through. Decisions like that aren't easy to change later." I thought about it every day, believe me. After meeting with the lawyer, I went to see my new house. It was on the north side of Malibu, in a more secluded location than my current one, smaller in size but with an equally beautiful ocean view. Most importantly, it was a new beginning, a place without painful memories. The realtor, a young woman named Susan, was waiting for me at the entrance. "Mr. Hammond, it's good to see you again. Are you ready to take another look at your new home before the final signing of the papers?" "Of course, Susan." We walked through a spacious living room with panoramic windows overlooking the ocean. The kitchen was smaller than my current house, but more modern. 2 bedrooms instead of 3 was all I needed. No extra rooms that would be empty and remind me that I was alone. "I like it," I said after I finished looking around. "When can I move in?" "As soon as all the papers are signed," Susan replied. "That's scheduled to happen in a week. But if you need it sooner, I can try to speed up the process." "No, a week is fine. I need time to pack and say goodbye to the old house." On the way home, I pondered the changes ahead. A new house, a new phone number, a new life. At 67 years old, I was starting with a clean slate. It was both scary and exciting at the same time. There was an envelope waiting for me at home, slipped under the door. I recognized Otis's handwriting immediately. My first instinct was to throw the letter away without reading it, but something stopped me. Perhaps the last vestiges of paternal feeling. I opened the envelope and began to read. "Dad, I know you don't want to see or hear from me, and I understand why. What I did is unforgivable. I betrayed you, your trust, your love. There are no words that can undo it. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I write to tell you that I have kept my promise. Octavia's father, Percival, is home now. I've hired a 24-hour caregiver for him and given him back control of his finances. He's still not in the best shape after all he's been through, but the doctors say he's getting better. As for Octavia, she's still awaiting trial. Her lawyer is trying to get her declared insane, but the DA's office is pushing for the maximum sentence because of the attempted murder. I filed for divorce. It doesn't matter to you, I know, but I wanted you to know I'm no longer with the man who tried to kill you. I've also paid off all my debts using the money from the sale of Octavia and I's house and my investments. I'm bankrupt, but I'm free of those people. I'm not asking for a second chance, Dad. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to fix what can be fixed, and that I'm truly sorry for the pain I've caused you. Otis, I set the letter aside, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Part of me wanted to believe that Otis was sincere, that he was truly remorseful and trying to change. But the other part, the more rational part, reminded me that he'd already fooled me once into believing he was sincere and caring. I decided not to respond to the letter. Instead, I started packing for the move. As I sorted through closets and drawers, I found items I hadn't seen in years. Photos of Lillian, old letters, souvenirs from trips we'd taken together, and of course, pictures of Otis, from infancy to adulthood. I stared for a long time at a picture of Otis, a 5-year-old boy with a bright smile sitting on my shoulders at an amusement park. His eyes shone with happiness, and so did mine. Somewhere along the way from that happy child to a grown man, something went wrong. Something I didn't notice or couldn't prevent. With a heavy heart, I put all of Otis' pictures away in a separate box. Not to take with me, but to keep in storage. I wasn't ready to completely erase him from my life, but I couldn't keep his pictures in front of my eyes every day either. The next day I met Hector for lunch at our favorite restaurant on the pier. His shoulder was already fully healed from his injury, but sometimes he still wrinkled it when he made sudden movements. "How are the preparations for the move going?" he asked when we placed our order. "Slowly but surely," I replied. "It's amazing how much stuff accumulates over a lifetime. I'll give most of it to charity." "Reasonable. New endeavors require getting rid of excess baggage, and not just metaphorical baggage." I nodded. "Otis left me a letter yesterday." Hector tensed. "And what did he want?" "Didn't ask for anything. Just said he brought Octavia's father home, filed for divorce, and paid his debts." "And you believe him?" I shrugged. "I don't. Part of me wants to believe, but he's already abused your trust once," Hector finished for me. "Exactly. And even if he's telling the truth, it doesn't change what he did, or what he planned to do." Hector took a sip of wine. "Are you still confident in your decision to cut all ties?" I thought for a moment. "Yes, it's not easy, but it's necessary. For my own peace of mind and well-being. Then you have my support, my friend. And I will be there for you when you need help or just company." "Thank you, Hector. I don't know what I would have done without you these months." We raised our glasses in a toast to a friendship that had stood the test of time and adversity. The week flew by with the hassle of packing and organizing the move. Finally, the day came when I had to leave the old house and move into the new one. The movers had already taken most of the furniture and boxes. I stood on the veranda, looking at the ocean from this vantage point for the last time. So many memories were associated with this place. Some pleasant, quiet evenings with a book and a glass of whiskey, visits from friends, quiet reflections on life. Others painful, the betrayal of my son, Octavia's attack, the realization that my own family saw me only as a source of money. The ringing of the doorbell interrupted my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. The movers had finished their work, and Hector and I had agreed to meet at the new house. I cautiously approached the door and peered through the peephole. "Otis." My heart beat faster. Whether from fear or sudden hope, I couldn't tell. "Dad, I know you're in there." His voice sounded muffled through the door. "Please, I just want to say goodbye. I know you're moving in today." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to open the door, to see him one last time. The other part reminded me of all the reasons I decided to end the relationship. "Dad, please. 5 minutes. I won't ask for an apology or a second chance. Just say goodbye." I took a deep breath and opened the door. Otis stood on the doorstep, thin and gaunt. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights. He was dressed simply, jeans and a sweater instead of his usual expensive suits. "5 minutes," I said, stepping aside to let him pass. He walked in, looking around at the nearly empty house. "You're almost done moving in, I see." "Yeah, today's the last day here." An awkward silence hung between us. So many words needed to be said, and at the same time, none appropriate. "I got your letter," I finally said. He nodded. "I'm glad I did. Everything I wrote is true. I'm really trying to fix what can be fixed." "That's good." I didn't know what else to say. "Dad, I didn't come to apologize. I know what I did is unforgivable. I just wanted to see you one last time and say thank you. Thank you? I was surprised. Yes, for everything you've done for me, for the education, for the support, for the love I didn't appreciate, and for giving me a chance to avoid prison, even after everything I've done. I was silent, not knowing how to respond to his words. I understand why you decided to cut all ties, Otis continued, and I respect your decision. I won't try to contact you or find you. Just know that I will work on myself every day to better myself. Not to earn your forgiveness. I know that's impossible, but for myself. So that one day I can look in the mirror and not hate the person I see. His words sounded sincere, but I no longer trusted my ability to distinguish Otis's sincerity from his acting. Too much was at stake, and the wound of betrayal was too deep. I wish you luck, Otis, I said at last. I sincerely do. I hope you find your way. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Thank you, Dad. Yeah, I'll be going. I won't take up any more of your time. He turned toward the door, then stopped and pulled a small box out of his pocket. I wanted to give you these. They're Grandpa's cufflinks. You gave them to me for my college graduation, remember? I think they should come back to you. He put the box on the table by the door and walked out without looking back. I stood looking at the closing door with a heavy heart and a jumble of thoughts. Part of me wanted to run after him, to tell him we could try to fix things, start over. But the more rational part knew that some things couldn't be fixed. Some wounds were too deep to heal completely. I picked up the box and opened it. Inside were my father's gold cufflinks, the only valuable thing he had. He had bequeathed them to me, and I had passed them on to Otis, hoping that one day he would pass them on to his son. Now the circle closed, and the cufflinks came back to me. I closed the box and put it in my pocket. Then I walked around the empty house one last time, checking to see if I had forgotten anything, and walked out, locking the door with a key I would never need again. My new house greeted me with silence and the fresh smell of paint. The movers had already put the furniture in its place, unpacked some of the boxes. Hector, as promised, was waiting for me with a bottle of champagne. To a new home and a new life, he proclaimed as we clinked glasses on the veranda overlooking the ocean. To a new life, I echoed. I spent the next few days setting up the house to my liking, unpacking the remaining boxes, getting used to the new space. I had a new phone number that only Hector and a few other close friends knew about. No contact with Otis. No reminders of the betrayal. Slowly, I began to find a rhythm to my new life. In the mornings, I walked along the beach, enjoying the silence and beauty of the ocean. In the afternoons, I read books I had long wanted to read, or worked in the small garden I had begun to plant behind the house. In the evenings, I would sometimes go out with Hector or other friends, sometimes just sitting on the veranda watching the sunset. The pain of betrayal didn't disappear completely, I doubted it ever would, but it became dull, muted, like an old wound that only hurts in certain weather. One evening, about a month after the move, I was sitting on the veranda with a glass of whiskey, looking out at the ocean. The sun was just about to disappear over the horizon, coloring the sky and water deep shades of orange and purple. The waves were crashing against the shore, creating a soothing, rhythmic noise. I thought about my life, about the decisions that had brought me to this moment, about Lillian, who left too soon, about Otis, whom I had lost not to death but to betrayal, about the friends who stayed close and the ones who turned out not to be who I thought they were. And for the first time in a long time, I felt not only bitterness and disappointment, but a strange release. A release from expectations, from illusions, from toxic relationships that hurt. I realized that sometimes you have to let go of even the closest of connections if they become a source of suffering rather than joy. I didn't know what the future would bring. Perhaps one day I would find the strength to forgive Otis. Not to repair the relationship, but for my own peace of mind. Perhaps I would never be able to do that, but now at this moment, sitting on the veranda of my new home, I felt peaceful. I felt that despite all the hardships and betrayals, I had stood my ground. I had defended myself, my dignity, my right to a happy life. Finishing my whiskey, I stood up and took one last look at the ocean before entering the house. Tomorrow would be a day without the shadow of betrayal, without the weight of unfulfilled expectations. A day where I would live for myself, not for anyone else. And that thought brought me more peace than anything I'd had in months.